I love your skirt. Where did you get it?
Isn't it lovely? It was my mother's.
Vintage. So adorable. That is the ugliest effing skirt I've ever seen.
Cinderella is both underappreciated and misunderstood. It's either that she's not enough of a strong female role model, or it's okay that she's not because of the ABUSE. And both of those are wrong, because they're completely missing the point. Cinderella is a strong and brave role model, not despite who she is, but because of who she is. Cinderella and her stepmother, for the most part, remain calm and composed. But Cinderella is hopeful, kind, and thankful, which contrasts greatly with the stepmother's jealousy, greed, and mistreatment. Both of their approaches are subtle and indirect, and I think that's unfortunately one reason Cinderella is so overlooked and misjudged. Her strength is a quiet strength. She's not in your face, loud, or pushy. She's very quiet and unassuming. And like all character traits, these qualities have both strengths and weaknesses. But we do everyone a disservice when we completely ignore the strengths. So first we're going to go over the story, and then we'll get into comparing and contrasting the strong but soft femininity of Cinderella with the toxic, aggressive femininity of the stepmother, and how Cinderella can inspire us, everyone, not just women, even almost 75 years later. Before the movie even officially starts, the song during the credits serves to set our expectations with the lines, "Though you're dressed in rags, you wear an air of queenly grace. Anyone can see a throne would be your proper place." So right off the bat, we're establishing that despite her external appearance, her character makes her worthy to be royalty, which I think is a strong start. In the prologue, we're given Cinderella's backstory. Her mother died while she was young, but her father was kind and devoted. He thought the best thing would be for her to have a mother in her life again, which is a good idea in theory. Too bad that didn't really work out for him. Based on how old Cinderella appears in these illustrations, it doesn't seem like too much time has passed since this new marriage before her father passes away, which seems totally normal and not suspicious at all. But it was after his death that the stepmother, Lady Tremaine, showed her true colors. She was cold and cruel and squandered the family fortune on her immature stepdaughters, Drizella and Anastasia, and let the estate fall into disrepair. But while Cinderella was forced to become a servant in her own home,
it's work, 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 all the time work.
Through it all, Cinderella remained ever gentle and kind.
So as the story really begins, finally, Cinderella wakes up from a wonderful dream and gets ready for the day while she sings to the mice and birds. It's okay though, because as unsanitary as this looks, they are friends, not pests.
Friends.
Apparently. She sings about how a dream is a wish your heart makes while we see the castle through her tower window. She does lament being ordered around so much, but maintains her cheerful attitude and says that no matter what, they can't keep her from dreaming. I mean, that's a really great attitude to have. One of the mice, Jack, tells her that there's a new mouse. Did I mention the mice can talk? I don't think the birds can. I don't think any of the other animals can. Huh. What does that mean? She opens her drawer full of assorted small animal clothing, and boy do I have questions about that. I guess it's better than some hobbies. But Jack tells her it's a boy mouse, so she better put that dress right back and bring out some man clothes so we can reinforce toxic gender stereotypes. Did I sound too sarcastic or not too sarcastic enough? Anyways, with the properly gendered clothing, Cinderella follows Jack to the new mouse who's caught in a trap and is very naked, which is something I didn't expect to have to specify, but he seems comfortable with that. The nudity. I love the view of Cinderella's huge head from inside the trap. It just seems so distorted and almost Lovecraftian from the mouse's perspective.
That's Lovecraftian!
Well, except that Cinderella ends up being benevolent. She gives the mouse clothes, thank goodness, cover yourself up, boy, and names him Gus. And Jack warns Gus about the cat, Lucifer, but Gus doesn't seem to understand or even take it seriously, so I'm sure that'll go well for him. On her way downstairs, Cinderella tries to coax said cat, Lucifer, out of the stepmother's room. But he stops halfway out, so Cinderella eventually just closes the door on him, pushing him the rest of the way out, which, sure, might have been the writers trying to establish Lucy as uncooperative, but as a childless cat lady, this is just standard cat behavior. In or out, buddy, I don't have time to be standing here all day. Gosh. Once in the kitchen, we meet the dog Bruno, and because of the appropriateness of the name Lucifer for the cat, I was a bit disappointed to find out that Bruno just means brown, and there doesn't seem to be any more interesting reason for him to have that name. What is interesting, though, is that Bruno is asleep and appears to be having a very engaging dream. And when he communicates to Cinderella, without talking though, that he was dreaming of catching Lucifer, Cinderella surprisingly tells him to stop dreaming. And that's a good moment to have, because not all dreams are good or worth pursuing. And much like her situation, if he can't live with the frustrating circumstances, he'll get kicked out. She tells him to try to learn to like cats, and even though she wasn't able to, she still tries to help out and find something positive in Lucifer. So rather than lashing out, Cinderella finds hope in her belief that there is good in everyone and everything, and gives even Lucifer the benefit of the doubt. But even after Cinderella tried to defend him,
There must be something good about him.
Lucifer waits until her back is turned and then antagonizes Bruno. He doesn't retaliate, but because he does growl, letting the cat know to back off, Bruno gets thrown out, which Lucifer enjoys. While Cinderella goes outside to feed the chickens and other farm animals, we get an interesting scene where the mice have to work together to get past Lucifer so they can get to the food outside before it's all gone. But wouldn't Cinderella have been aware that where she placed Lucifer's bowl might keep the mice from getting outside safely? You have time to sew them all those clothes, but not to make sure they can get to their food? Whatever. Jack draws the short straw, tail, and is the one to distract Lucifer while the other mice go out to get food. But it's out of the frying pan and into the fire, because even though they've made it past Lucifer, now they have to fight the chickens for grain. And you might not know this, but chickens are omnivores and they will eat mice. I mean, they won't if there's other food, but thankfully Cinderella does chase them away so the mice can get their share. On the way back though, Gus has taken almost more than he can carry compared to the few corn kernels the other mice grabbed, and when one mouse drops a kernel, this mouse prioritizes his safety, and probably Jack's too, and just leaves it behind. But Gus, who already wasn't taking the threat of Lucifer seriously, is unsatisfied with what he already had and stops to try to retrieve this kernel too. His failure alerts Lucifer, but Gus still doesn't notice, and eventually this literal cat and mouse game ends up with Gus, having lost all of his corn now, under a teacup on a tray that Cinderella is about to take upstairs to the stepmother and stepsisters. I know cats eat mice, well, mine just likes to bring them to me as a gift and to show off her hunting prowess, but I think Lucifer is just playing with these mice.
Didn't your mother ever tell you not to play with your food?
Because like Gus, he too was greedy. He doesn't need to eat them. The step family has been constantly ringing the service bells and yelling for Cinderella while she very patiently finishes getting breakfast together to bring it to everyone upstairs. Lucifer, still unsuccessful in catching Gus, finally hears one of the stepsisters scream and knows it must be the mouse. Now listen, I know these girls are petty and will blame Cinderella for anything and just enjoy seeing her in trouble. However, a live mouse in your breakfast dishes. That's extremely unsanitary, first of all. And a mouse with clothing on. Who do we know who spends all her free time clothing the pests of the house? Or maybe they're used to seeing mice with clothing on.
This is normal.
Can you imagine the step family at someone else's manor and wondering why their mice are naked? Naked mice are for the pores. But anyways, even though it's definitely out of character for Cinderella to do that, it does seem like something the stepsisters might do. So it's interesting to see them blaming Cinderella for something she would never, but they would definitely do. It doesn't really matter though, of course Cinderella is in trouble. The stepmother calls her in, and even though Cinderella calmly tries to defend herself, the stepmother won't listen. And gosh, I'm tired just listening to the list of chores she's assigned. Like, is that supposed to be for one day? Or like a week?
Oh yes. And one more thing, see that Lucifer gets his bath.
That is insane! But the stepmother doesn't yell. She doesn't even refer to this as a punishment. She just says that clearly Cinderella has too much time on her hands, so it's just a problem that must be fixed. Yikes. Now we get to find out what's going on inside the castle we saw through Cinderella's window, and we get a great introduction to the king as he throws his crown through a window, and then through that crown-shaped hole in the glass, we see him yelling about how his son needs to settle down and get married and produce some grandchildren. Wow, is this my dad?
You know he must marry one of them.
Then we meet the Duke, who is trying to calm the king down and also hiding from his violent but funny outbursts. The king's got baby fever, but also I get it. he does have to ensure that his legacy and his bloodline is passed down to protect the country he rules, so makes sense. We don't know much about the prince, and we never really find out much about him anyways, but we do know that he hasn't found a woman yet. And if you spend too much time on the internet, then you know it's because he's not straight. I mean, obviously. It couldn't be that he's immature, doesn't want to settle down, he's lazy, has high standards, is pretentious, impulsive, afraid of commitment, hasn't found the right woman yet, is busy, any number of other reasons. Oh, wait a second. We do find out the reason. The king says it's because his son has silly and romantic ideas. Well, that does sound pretty not straight to me. So while the duke says that they need to let the romance happen naturally, like the prince wants, the king says they're just arranging the circumstances.
Oh, no, it's just a few friends and their daughters.
If the prince should suspect.
And as the prince is coming home tonight, where was he before and why? Is what I would like to know. While it would be natural to hold a ball in his honor, I am with the duke here. Tonight? First of all, isn't the prince gonna be tired? And also, I know you have people and resources, but that is really short notice.
I want this to be big. Every princess must have her own introduction. Now, send for the cooks and tell the band to start rehearsing. And I want 4 footmen for every carriage.
And what if the eligible maidens they hope attend have plans? You want them to just drop everything for a chance to meet the prince? No thank you. I have a previous engagement. I'm replaying Fire Emblem 3 Houses tonight, and that just can't wait. The king's reasoning is, with that many women, the prince is bound to show interest in one of them.
You see, Rogers, one of these is bound to change his mind.
I get it, I understand his train of thought, and I guess a larger pool of people should increase your odds of finding that right person, but also you might just end up with a pool of a lot of people you're not interested in, like online dating. Back at the manor, the stepsisters are having their music lesson.
I use that term loosely.
And even music, which should be beautiful, is corrupted by the sisters and made ugly. While cleaning the floor, Cinderella sings the same song.
Sing, sweet nightingale.
Of course, very beautifully. The song is short and the animation is very beautiful, but the lyrics don't really seem that meaningful unless there's some symbolism they're going for with the nightingale. As it is, it's almost as repetitive as contemporary Christian music. Lucifer, of course, can't stand to see Cinderella happy, even though she is just cleaning the floor, so he jumps in her dust pile and leaves dirty footprints all around the room. Cinderella grabs her broom and says she's gonna teach that cat a lesson. Is she gonna whack him with the broom? Does Cinderella mistreat animals? In this 3-hour essay, no, I'm just kidding. I'm sure it was just to sweep up the mess and then maybe she'd put him outside or something or give him an extra bath.
2 showers in one day? What about my skin? It's gonna be so dry.
Either way, she's interrupted by the delivery of an urgent message from the king. She makes a sarcastic comment about the music lesson before going into the music room. These girls have nothing going for them. I mean, you almost feel sorry for them. Almost. Then we get my favorite moment with the stepmother.
Above all, self-control.
Yes!
Even as a kid, this scene always cracked me up. The sisters are silly and destructive as they fight over the message, and after the stepmother reads the invitation to the ball, Cinderella points out that she should be able to attend as well as she is also an eligible maiden. The stepsisters make fun of her for working hard, but Cinderella appeals to the authority of the king and her family name. Now the stepsisters are shocked when the stepmother seemingly agrees to let Cinderella go.
Do you realize what you just said?
Of course. I said, if.
But Cinderella can only go if she finishes her chores and has something to wear. Cinderella plans to fix up her mother's really ugly old dress, which is really sweet, but still really ugly. And of course the stepfamily immediately begins shouting for her and assigning more chores, even after everything she was assigned that morning. So she has to leave, but the mice decide that after all she's done for them, you know, sewing clothes for them that they don't care about wearing, why don't they fix the dress for her? A lady mouse kicks Jack and Gus out because sewing is for women, and they go to get some trimming. In another room, the stepsisters are angrily throwing out old clothes and accessories in a rush to get ready for the ball. The animation in the scene is really interesting. We mostly focus on their shadows as they throw away a sash and a necklace, which will be perfect. Until Lucifer finds out what the mice are doing and tries to stop them. He's not trying to protect the family and keep the evil mice from stealing. He's just being a jerk for the sake of it. I'm sorry, Ghost, but kind of like your cat lady.
Yeah.
I have never seen a cat so intentionally petty, and one that seems so aware of it too.
She's my baby, and I love her.
Well, I thought sewing was for women, but when Jack and Gus make it back, everyone is sewing. I guess women just rhymed with trimmin'. So every review I read complaining about how sexist that line was clearly did not pay attention to this scene. When it's time to leave for the ball, the stepmother pretends to be surprised and disappointed that Cinderella didn't have time to do all those chores and get ready to go to the ball. Cinderella tries to hold it together, but cries as she gazes at the castle from her window. Hey, at least she has a great view. Then the mice and birds surprise her with the dress. And as she excitedly runs downstairs, the stepmother pretends to compliment Cinderella's dress, but is indirectly encouraging the stepsisters to tear it apart, preventing Cinderella from going. She even tells the girls to stop. Wow, she's so benevolent. After they leave, Cinderella runs outside into the courtyard and cries. She says that there's nothing left to believe in, until her fairy godmother materializes. This doesn't seem to surprise Cinderella all that much. Why do I have questions about that? The fairy godmother says that she is here because of Cinderella's hope and faith. Faith in what, though? I know the song says have faith in your dreams, but what does that mean? What good does that do you? The fairy godmother says she'll help Cinderella get to the ball and transforms a pumpkin into a carriage, the mice into horses, the horse into a driver, and Bruno into a footman, and keeps overlooking the obvious. The dress.
Do me over, you know, the gown, jewels, carriage, glass slippers, and like that.
Oh, you mean this model?
Yeah, that's it.
But when she does transform that, boy, do we get just a spectacularly beautiful scene. Also, how do the animals just know how to do their new jobs? This is like Hocus Pocus, where the witches suddenly know how to use microphones. Also, how is being human, or the mice being horses, temporarily, how is that going to affect them the rest of their lives? That is a pretty insane experience. So, the fairy godmother tells her that this dream won't last. She only has until midnight, and Cinderella doesn't mind at all. It's more than she ever even hoped for. Girl dreamed big, but she never expected those dreams to come true. It was just the hope that they could that she clung to. In the castle, the poor prince looks bored out of his mind as he's being introduced to what looks like hundreds of women.
Every single princess on the planet.
I don't know how the king thought this would be romantic and arranging the meet-cute circumstances. This looks boring as heck to me. So I also don't know how this makes him not straight either. I feel like it's kind of sexist to expect him to just jump on every single girl there. Like there's no difference, they're just bodies to him. Wouldn't this belief come from assuming all men are the same and the prince doesn't fit this toxic and frankly myopic view of all men?
I can only see women as one entity, and they're all dead to me. Affectionate.
He rolls his eyes at the stepsisters, not because he's not straight, but because they are gross and ridiculous.
My knight in shining armor.
And that is what they call a meet cute.
And he's interested in Cinderella.
A woman.
And the only one not chasing after him. The Duke says, "I've never seen her before," and the king replies with, "That's one thing in her favor." Why is the Duke never seeing her before in her favor? Because he has bad taste? The king finds him annoying? She hasn't come to 100 of these balls before? Or because the Duke has a reputation of being a ladies' man? I don't know where he'd find the time. I'm probably just being stupid, and you will correct me in the comments, so thank you.
Affectionate.
To encourage this budding romance, the king has the music start and the lights dimmed so that the prince and Cinderella can have a magical evening. The sooner they fall in love, the sooner he gets those grandchildren. The stepmother thinks she might recognize Cinderella, but before she can get a closer look, the Duke draws a curtain so that the prince and Cinderella can dance away from prying eyes. Man, this scene is beautiful. The song is beautiful, the art is beautiful. That's all I have to say about the scene. It's just beautiful. But it's not meant to last. And having lost track of time, Cinderella is surprised when the clock strikes midnight. I don't know how she did that. I would have just been really stressed the whole time. Like, oh, it's 10:35 now. Okay, it must have been 3 hours since I checked. It's 10:35 still. I don't know how that worked out for her. She must have really been lost in the prince's eyes there. She only has until the last stroke before the spell is broken, so she's got to get out of there and fast. The prince says to wait because how is he gonna find her? The woman of his dreams. But he's immediately swarmed by women as soon as he tries to go after her. The Duke is freaking out because the king is gonna kill him, but Cinderella makes it back to her carriage, leaving behind one glass slipper. The spell breaks after they're out of sight of the castle, but before making it back home, and the only thing left is the other slipper. And Cinderella is so thankful, not just for one delightful evening, but also to be able to keep such a beautiful memento. What if Cinderella had stayed, though? I don't think the prince would have minded.
Unfortunately, it was already a little too late. First, Cinderella lost her permanent, then her jewels, then her gown.
My, you heiresses certainly depreciate fast.
He seems pretty chill. He likes that she wasn't like the other girls. And if Cinderella wasn't surprised by the fairy godmother, maybe explaining the spell would have been simple too. I just think this would have saved everyone some time. Back at the castle, the poor Duke has to tell the king. Of course, he's furious and accuses the Duke of scheming with the prince this whole time, and man, either this sword is amazingly sharp or the king is incredibly strong, or both, because he is easily and cleanly cutting right through this thick furniture as he's going after the Duke. He does calm down when the Duke tells him that the prince wants to marry this girl, so the king says to go and try the slipper on every girl in the kingdom, and whoever fits it gets to marry the prince. And when the Duke points out my problem with this plan, that the slipper could fit any number of girls, the king just says that's the prince's problem. I guess he's more of an idea guy. The next morning, Cinderella is getting breakfast ready, and how is she not dead? Honestly, she did an inhuman amount of chores yesterday and then partied until midnight, and she's totally fine? Wow. Now that's real girl boss behavior. Upstairs, as Cinderella is bringing in the breakfast, the stepmother reveals that the prince doesn't know the identity of the girl he was dancing with last night. I guess she wasn't tagged in any of the photos on Facebook, but he will marry whoever fits into the glass slipper, so everyone still has a chance. This decree is really in the girl's favor and not the prince's. As far as I can tell, it says that the girl can marry him if she wants, but that the prince is obligated to marry the girl that fits the slipper. That has the potential to really go not well. Poor guy. The king must be really desperate to marry him off. But upon finding out this information, that it was the prince she was dancing with and that he wishes to marry her, Cinderella drops the tray and breaks all the dishes on it, and it seems like she's in a daze, which makes the stepmother very suspicious and probably jealous. She follows Cinderella up all those stairs to her tower room and locks her inside. Cinderella sobs as once again she feels so close to her dreams coming true, only to have them crushed in front of her by her stepmother. The Duke arrives, and while the mice manage to get the key out of the stepmother's pocket and all the way up those stairs to Cinderella, the sisters try their best to shove their enormous Sasquatch feet into the teeny tiny little slipper. Before the mice can slip the key under the door to Cinderella, Lucifer takes it, and no matter what the birds and mice do, they cannot get it back. This is another instance where Lucy has nothing to gain from this except spiting Cinderella and finding joy in causing her pain. Like all cats, really. He's not protecting his family or doing anything with good intentions, he just wants to hurt others. Cinderella tells the birds to go get Bruno, who scares Lucifer out the window. I know cats always land on their feet, but he is definitely down at least one of his 9 lives after a fall like that. But what's interesting is that Bruno got to fulfill his dream of chasing Lucifer. I guess he didn't catch him, but he still got to attack him. This time though, it was to protect Cinderella. It wasn't just an empty dream of chasing a cat, this dream had a good purpose. Cinderella runs downstairs and the Duke really zeroes in on her feet.
My cousin runs a website that you'd really be into.
I mean, I know she's got to try the slipper on, that's the whole point, but still. But even he could see her charm and grace through her rags. The stepmother carefully moves her cane out to trip the herald who's carrying the glass slipper, and it breaks. Because if her daughters can't marry the prince, no one can. This is probably the most openly aggressive the stepmother is, and it's still pretty subtle. She thinks she's won, the Duke thinks he's dead, but Cinderella has the other slipper. Which makes sense, these things often come in pairs. We cut to wedding bells, and as she's walking down the stairs, Cinderella loses her shoe again. I get that we're mirroring that moment, but I don't know, man, you're the queen now. Can't you get your shoes custom made to fit better? You're not buying them from Temu, or even like JCPenney or Macy's or something. She and the prince leave in a carriage led by the farm horse, while the mice, in very intricate uniforms now, look on. I guess Cinderella has the time and budget to really go ham on her hobby now. Also, wait, where's Bruno? Did he get a happy ending too? Wait, where? Oh, no, there he is. Running alongside the horses. I just wasn't paying enough attention. I don't know what this means for Bruno's future, but I'm glad we got to see where he is now. Anyways, the movie ends with Cinderella and the prince kissing, and they lived happily ever after. Well, I liked that. Oh no!
What?
I left the fan on the whole time I was recording.
Well, that was stupid.
Okay, but should I turn it off or just leave it on for consistency, I guess?
Bye.
Ghost! Seriously? That is a simple question. What do you even do around here? I guess I'll turn it off. I'm cold anyways. It is only 74 degrees today. Well, if the audio's different after this, that's why. Thanks for the help, Ghost. Alright, so something I've always thought was weird are the excuses people make for characters like Cinderella and Snow White, as if they don't really like the characters, but it's okay that they're not the biggest girl bosses ever because they were ABUSED. And I think that's a problem. Okay, from now on I'm gonna say mistreatment, even though I don't think that's as strong or accurate of a word, but censoring audio is a lot of work.
I don't like doing it.
If you're trying to say, yeah, Cinderella isn't out here sticking it to the patriarchy and fighting against her mistreaters, but then excuse her because of the mistreatment, you've missed the point. With these characters, Cinderella and Snow White, the mistreatment is there, yes, but it's not the point because the tone and focus of the story isn't on the mistreatment and the escape and recovery from that. If you want to know how seriously to take something in a story, you have to evaluate how it's handled. I was just thinking about this because I just recently rewatched Overboard with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, and the plot is insane if you don't handle it the right way. If you evaluate this film completely at face value, it's the horrifying story of a rich socialite suffering from amnesia who is kidnapped by the carpenter she hired, and to get revenge on her for ruining his tools and refusing to pay him, he lies to her and tells her she's the mother of his rambunctious children and makes her wait on him hand and foot and really mistreats her. But then the movie ends with her forgiving him for lying to her and using her, and it's a triumphant, beautiful moment where she rejects her life of luxury in favor of being a wife and a mother. Now, if the rest of the movie hadn't been comedic, this would have been a very horrifying and confusing ending. But the movie doesn't focus on the horror and the gaslighting. That would be a very different but very interesting movie. It focuses on how miserable she was when she had everything a person could want and was waited on hand and foot, and contrasted that with how she grew to be much happier and gentler and fulfilled when she was investing in the relationships with who would eventually actually be her real husband and children. Oof, this is not a feminist-approved movie. And it's not like this would help, but the carpenter does have an arc of his own, and because of his fake wife's influence, learns alongside her how to be more invested in his children's lives and how to treat her as well. Honestly, it's pretty great to see. But if you're still unconvinced, here's something that I think unequivocally shows, specifically in Cinderella, that the mistreatment wasn't the point of the story. The side plot with the king and the duke is, from a purely literal sense, a mistreatmentive relationship. And it's completely played for laughs. Can you imagine a serious story about someone moving on from the mistreatment they suffered at the hands of evil family members, only to also have a comedic side plot about ABUSE? Because that's what Cinderella would be by this logic. It would be self-contradictory and very tone-deaf. There's a lot of stuff that happens in Cinderella, but not all of it is the point. All the pieces in a story need to serve a purpose, but they're not all going to be the purpose. And in this case, the point wasn't the mistreatment itself, the point was her hopefulness and kindness in hopeless and unkind circumstances. We're also told that her dad died, that's an important part of her backstory, but her grief and dealing with the loss of her father isn't the point or even a part of the story. The story mainly focuses on Cinderella's hopefulness. That's what's so beautiful about her. So even though she says she can't tell us what her wish is because then it won't come true, during the credits, the song tells us that her rags can't hide her queenly grace. And during the opening scene, we can see the castle through her tower window as she sings about her heart wishes through her dreams, almost as though this is a window into her dreams. So while her wish was to become a queen and live in the castle, which she would have to marry a prince to accomplish,
Holy frog's legs, that really makes me mad.
this was never her goal. This was simply a dream that she held on to as she cheerfully and diligently made the best of her circumstances. Going to the ball wasn't just a casual night out for her and an escape from the drudgery of her daily life, and a really cool opportunity and experience. It was a taste of her dream. But still, she didn't see this as a way to achieve her dream. She didn't have any elaborate plans for meeting and seducing the prince. I don't think she hoped or expected to meet the prince. And even after dancing with him all evening, she still didn't even know who he was. And didn't make any effort to stay in contact. Her plan the whole time was to spend an evening in the castle, go back to the chateau, and spend the rest of her life there, her dreams fueled by the magic of that one evening, and finding solace in the fact that even though she's not there, a place that beautiful really did exist outside of her dreams. Had she wanted to marry a man, which coincidentally would have saved her from her circumstances, guess what? That would have been fine. It's okay. Great even to want to get married.
Wrong, you're terrible.
But her goal wasn't to be rescued by a man. It was to make the best of her situation by focusing on her dream and the good in the world around her. Even though she was unable to find any good points in Lucifer, it tells us a lot about her character that she tried. And she never even speaks ill of her terrible family. She does express her frustration though.
Oh, that clock. Killjoy. I hear you. Come on, get up, you say. Time to start another day. Even he orders me around.
And it's really weird if you point to this and call it a stubborn streak, and that's part of your argument for why she's a good feminist role model, because that came up a lot in the reviews I read. What you're saying is, bad character makes you a good feminist. You're not really making feminism look good. I don't think there's anything wrong with her expressing her frustration. It's just that if you're looking for moments like this and holding them in high regard, like, yes, this is what we should be encouraging young girls to emulate, that's what's weird. And why do we put down quiet and soft women so much? Yeah, sometimes those traits, like all traits, can manifest in negative ways like passivity or lenience, but quietness and softness are really undervalued. Loud and pushy people might do well in certain circumstances. Sure, maybe your voice might be heard more, I guess, but that's not always the best thing.
I talk a lot, so I've learned to just tune myself out.
Not everything needs to be said. Not everything is worth saying. There's a time to be loud and a time to be quiet. People are different, and most people are going to default to one or the other, and it's really unbalanced and unhelpful to only focus on one of these. Specifically because modern Western media tends to focus on the negatives, both the negatives of being quiet and soft and really demonizing that, not really supporting other women, are we? But also holding up rude women as being strong. That's not strength, that's immaturity. You can be a loud go-getter, but you can be that way without being rude and selfish. You can be quiet and also rude and selfish. But when you have your female main characters acting this way and the story rewarding that, you're sending the message that not only are quietness and softness weaknesses, they aren't, but you're also saying that strength is just getting what's mine and nobody better get in my way.
All right, girls, go girls.
That's disgusting, in men and women. In Cinderella, it's because of her faithfulness that her dream came true at the end. It's not that she sat around waiting for something to happen to her and the prince swooped in and saved her. It's also not that she was rewarded for being a passive little pushover and that the movie is trying to make Handmaid's Tale a reality. Heck, even the stepmother dreamed, but as we saw with Bruno, not all dreams are good. The stepmother sort of rejected reality, where whether or not she actually thought her stepdaughters were capable of achieving the things she pushed them towards, she did treat them as if they were refined and beautiful ladies that were capable of marrying the prince and ruling a country. If anything, Cinderella was actually more grounded. She dreamed big, but she never expected it to come true. And it's important that she thought that, because even though it was a less than ideal situation, she was still faithful and cheerful where she was. The point isn't that she did all this good stuff and was rewarded at the end, even though the song does say a dream that you wish will come true. The point is that she remained hopeful and had no expectation of a reward and worked hard anyways. That's why the story rewarded her, not with a taste of her dream, but the real thing. Deliverance from her mistreatment, a husband, and eventually probably children. I'm sure the king's happy about that. And life in a beautiful castle because she's now the queen. And yes, it does appear that it was just love at first sight and that he was just interested in her based on her appearance. And I'm sure that was part of it, but really, he was pretty far away, in a room full of dressed up, beautiful women. Not them. You know what set Cinderella apart? She was off doing her own thing. Rather awkwardly, I might add, and not fawning over him or waiting around to be introduced to him. Maybe she was oblivious to what was going on, or maybe she genuinely had no interest. But the prince showed interest in her when he saw that she wasn't interested in him. She was something different. She was not like the other girls.
She's so annoying.
Like I said, I'm sure that her beauty was part of it, and you know what? What the heck is wrong with that? Physical attraction isn't everything, and external beauty certainly fades over time, but it's not completely unimportant. So what? He thought she was beautiful. Oh no, it's the end of the world. And yeah, in the movie she's beautiful, but it's still because her outward beauty reflects her inward beauty. Even clothed in rags, she still exuded a queenly grace. And sure, they had a brief meet-cute moment. I'm sure there was physical attraction, but it was still her character that drew him to her. True beauty is inner beauty and your heart and your character, but like I said, what's wrong with outer beauty and presenting your best outer self as well, even for other people? Not trying to be beautiful for the approval or acceptance of others, but just being the beauty you want to see in the world. I don't think it's helpful to have incredibly strict standards and expectations like you can't leave the house without heels and gloves and lipstick, but perhaps we've overcorrected. It really doesn't take much effort or money to just not leave the house in pajama pants, okay? There are plenty of comfortable and cheap clothes out there that just look so much nicer. And personally, I think it shows respect towards others and yourself. Of course, character will always be more important than looks, so you certainly don't want to be vain or anything, or find your value in your appearance, but taking care of yourself is a good thing. And so what if you're not conventionally attractive, whatever that even means? In a world where we're constantly complaining about unrealistic beauty standards and everyone having an ED and plastic surgery becoming more and more common, doesn't Cinderella send a great message? Beauty trends come and go, but good character is timeless and the most beautiful of all. What's interesting is that while the stepsisters are ugly, well, more ridiculous looking, the stepmother isn't. She carries herself with a calm confidence.
Yes!
Most of the time. But her inner ugliness does always show in her facial expressions. Her curated demeanor is what's so scary about Lady Tremaine, and how she's able to be so manipulative. She never, at least on screen, lays a finger on Cinderella, and yet she is still a mistreater. This is the danger of feminine aggression. Because it's indirect, it's much more subtle and less physical, and it's very hard to prove. She could even claim she's being nice. She doesn't tell Cinderella that she can't go to the ball. She says, of course she can go as long as she has something to wear and finishes her work, but then assigns her an overwhelming amount of chores. And when Cinderella does finish the chores in time and has a dress to wear thanks to her animal friends, again, the stepmother doesn't prohibit her from going. She subtly draws attention to the elements of the dress that had been discarded by the stepsisters, actually by complimenting the dress. Unlike their mother, though, they resort to physically ripping the dress apart. But the stepmother had nothing to do with it. She was just complimenting Cinderella's dress. She was being nice. She even tells the girls that's enough and to stop.
Stop, don't come back.
The most physically aggressive she ever gets is when she almost imperceptibly moves her cane into the path of the herald to break the slipper he's holding. And that's awful, yeah, but still pretty low-key and very easy to claim as an accident. And no one blamed the stepmother when it happened. It explains how she was able to hide that side of her from Cinderella's dad. And some people cannot pick up on that kind of thing at all, so he probably had no idea. I'm sure the stepmother was also on her best behavior, specifically in front of him. Part of me wonders if Lady Tremaine killed Cinderella's dad. And if so, did she kill her last husband too before blowing through his fortune as well? Although she's a very indirect person, so if she was responsible for both of their deaths, it would have to be something like poison or manipulating someone into doing it for her. But how would she benefit from that? I guess if he weren't around, Cinderella would have literally no one to defend her and they'd be free to mistreat her, but wouldn't they have more money in the long run if the dad was around? I don't know, just something I think about sometimes. They, the stepmother and stepsisters, were all very greedy, which contrasted well with Cinderella's thankfulness. She had very little, but she still had clothes, food, a roof over her head, really everything she needed. The stepmother and stepsisters had more than they needed, and not only were they unthankful, they were furious that Cinderella was thankful. That's why they found this twisted joy in her loss, and they found entertainment in taking things from her and denying her. Misery loves company, and they probably couldn't stand that she was so cheerful despite her situation, while they wallowed in their misery. If I'm not happy, no one gets to be happy. This was reflected in Lucifer as well. I know cats eat mice, but story-wise, he too had everything he could ever want, except too many baths, but he still reveled in preventing the mice from getting their breakfast, retrieving the trimmings for Cinderella's gown, and rescuing Cinderella at the end. His goal wasn't to fulfill a need of his own, it was to torment the mice because they were happy, even though they had much less. And then there's Lucifer's whole thing with Bruno, sneakily antagonizing Bruno and then acting like the victim. In Cinderella's case, it's not like she would have had anyone to go to for help, but if you've ever dealt with this kind of aggression, you know it's frustratingly hard to prove and also frustratingly easy to excuse. Mean Girls goes into this kind of thing way more, and it's really funny, so I definitely recommend that if you're interested in seeing a story dealing specifically with feminine aggression. Basically, just a bunch of girls pretending to be friends while also somewhat secretly hating each other, well, actually openly, but indirectly hating each other, and being jealous of each other. It's fascinating.
We need to learn to just hate each other in silence.
You mean like what girls do?
Yeah, exactly. What girls do.
And while physical or direct aggression tends to be more masculine, whereas indirect aggression tends to be more feminine, and there is a reason for that, I did say tends. There are obviously and always exceptions. Women can be physically aggressive, while men can respond more indirectly. Speaking of stereotypes, supposedly Cinderella is bad because it reinforces negative gender stereotypes and limits women in what they can do. I don't think in any way Cinderella is saying that you have to get married and that you have to rely on a man, which Cinderella didn't do anyways, and that you have to dress like this and women have to act exactly a certain way. It is true that those things did happen in the movie and that the movie held them up as good things, but there was nothing indicating that everyone, or you in particular, have to do those things. And if you want to go so far as to claim that Cinderella is a bad example, first of all, you're nuts. But also, now you're limiting what girls can do because some girls are soft-spoken and agreeable. I mean, some men are too, of course. Some girls are extremely feminine. Most women want to get married.
Speak for yourself.
That doesn't mean you have to. This is where the focus on exact representation is so harmful. You don't have to be exactly like Cinderella to be inspired by her. You don't have to look like her. That's the weirdest one to me. You don't have to have the same personality, be in the same situation as her. Heck, you don't even have to be a woman. Cinderella's perseverance, diligence, hopefulness, and kindness should be inspiring to everyone, men and women. Well, on the note of gender stereotypes, let's talk about clothing. So even though Western culture is the way it is, something I wouldn't have even thought to comment on beyond a quick joke is when Cinderella laughs and gets Gus a shirt instead of a dress.
Oh, that does make a difference. He'll need a jacket.
But this article had a problem with it. This article had a problem with a lot of things. One thing I do agree with, to an extent, is that people should be able to just wear what they want. And rather than go off on a long tangent about the consequences of literally wearing whatever you want, whenever and wherever you want, and what that could mean, because trust me, I am thinking about it, that is not what this point is about. Instead, I'm going to focus on what is generally considered men's clothing and women's clothing and what that means. So, first of all, let people wear what they want. Do you think Gus wants to wear a dress?
No.
I don't like making assumptions, but I think I can say with authority that no, Gus did not want to wear a dress. I don't think that ever would have even crossed his tiny little pea-sized mind. He's too busy thinking about food, so get mad about that. So while reinforcing gendered clothing definitely isn't a part of the story at all, this comment was so funny to me, and Ghost and I talk about this kind of thing a lot, so I'm gonna talk about it. Clothing being considered masculine or feminine is largely determined by cultural expectations and current trends. I think the problem comes in when we think of clothing and other various outward accessories as not being generally preferred by or made for men or women, but as being inseparable from and inherent to that gender.
Would you please tell Daryl that this is not a woman's suit?
That's a woman's suit.
If I wear a men's shirt, and I often do, it's just because I want to wear a brightly colored Hawaiian shirt with sharks all over it, and unfortunately, I just can't find that in the ladies section. But it doesn't change anything about me. I am just a woman that's wearing a man's shirt. Or really, a shirt that was sold in the men's section. That's it. It's just cloth, guys. There's nothing inherently gendered by the way we drape cloth over our bodies. In the West today, dresses are cut and styled for women's bodies. That's why they look better on women and why it's considered women's clothing.
That there's a woman's suit.
I do not buy women's clothes. Do not make that mistake again.
You're wearing a woman's suit?
No, I do. I wear men's suits.
I guess I should also point out that wearing masculine clothing isn't what makes a man and vice versa. You're not the epitome of masculinity or femininity just because you cosplay as a trad influencer. But people pushing boundaries and experimenting are how styles and expectations change, and also how ideas change, so you do have to use good judgment there. This is why you need an objective standard for things like this. The Bible is clear right from creation about the differences and distinctions between men and women, so that's what I like to point to. But we also have verses like Deuteronomy 22:5 that are pretty clear about men's and women's clothing. And some people like to try to invalidate that one in particular by saying something like, well, you wear mixed fabrics, so you don't even follow all the Old Testament rules either. First of all, if I break a rule, it doesn't mean the rule is invalid now, it just means I broke a rule, so what the heck kind of logic is that? But also, that's not the case here. Old Testament laws are categorized under moral, ceremonial, and sometimes judicial laws, and we're not under ceremonial law anymore like the mixed fabric one that everyone always brings up. That's as much as I'm going to go into it here. You can just look up Old Testament moral and ceremonial law if you're interested. You should do that anyways because you'll find arguments against what I just said too, so don't take my word for it. Got Questions does have a good summary though, and I definitely recommend that as a good starting point. The point is, men are to look like men and women are to look like women, but that's it. It's like modesty. We aren't given a list of things to wear or not to wear or how to style things. Clothing and cultural expectations are completely different now from how they were back then when this was written. But the idea is one that transcends time and culture as a universally applicable principle. It's not about the clothing itself, it's about the ideas, attitude, and intention behind it, and whether or not you are honoring God, others, and yourself in the way that you dress. Women wear what's considered men's clothes all the time and no one cares. One influencer I follow, Deserted and Urban on Instagram, sometimes wears skirts, and honestly, he looks kind of amazing.
He'd look great in a skirt.
What?
But he also doesn't look like a woman. He still maintains a very masculine silhouette.
I feel pretty sexy.
Bye, Mom.
He probably didn't.
I noticed.
Which is also interesting because there are cuts and styles and silhouettes that we associate with masculinity or femininity. Harsher cuts and angles in clothing are considered masculine, and softer, rounder designs are more feminine. And I just think that's so interesting that we can symbolize and reflect things like strength or grace in fabric. That's crazy and cool. And I know I just said that there's nothing inherently gendered about cloth. That is still true. This is a different point. Representing and reflecting masculinity and femininity in fashion is totally different from fashion and what you wear, defining and being masculinity and femininity. In Cinderella, there never was gendered clothing being forced on anyone, so it's weird to point this out. Gus didn't want to wear a dress, so you're not standing up for him. If anything, the mice's natural state seems to be nudity, and Cinderella was the one, well, not forcing, but providing clothing for them. So if you're gonna be mad about something, why not be mad about that?
Your primitive notions of modesty.
On that note, why were the mice wearing clothes? This is not important to the story, not even a plot hole, just me overthinking Disney movies like how I can't stop thinking about what happened to the economy of Eric's kingdom after he married Ariel. They lived on the coast. They're shown eating seafood. I would assume that fishing plays a very important role in their economy, and seafood is probably a huge part of the citizens' diet. And now you have to worry about relations with the mer people as well, who are all friends with sea creatures. Some of them, but not sharks, and only some starfish and some mollusks are also sapient, but the land animals, at least the ones we encounter, aren't? It just sounds like a diplomatic and economic nightmare. Anyways, I'm supposed to be talking about mice. So, the only new mouse we encounter in the movie is Gus. He's naked when we find him, whatever that means in mouse culture. I mean, he's not uncomfortable in the slightest, but also doesn't seem to care too much when Cinderella puts the clothing on him. Are there moral implications in mouse culture related to clothing and nudity? Is Cinderella teaching them about modesty in her free time? Are they just going along with Cinderella's hobby because she's so nice to them? Is this what separates the civilized mice from the wild mice? The clothed mice, though not free from danger, are now reliant on a human for protection and food. So do other mice see this as a cult? Please, someone write this fan fiction. What's been the most surprising to me as I've been working on this is how, particularly in feminist reviews of Cinderella, so many people talked about how much better she was than Snow White. Not that they think Cinderella is above reproach or anything, but at least she's not Snow White. Look, I'm not surprised that people have a problem with either of these princesses, but what's particularly weird to me is that Snow White was much more proactive than Cinderella and really took care of herself in a way that Cinderella didn't. She barely escapes a life-threatening situation, tries to find shelter, and rather than expecting to live in the dwarves' cottage for free, she cleans and cooks and really improves their lives. I don't know, man, seems pretty proactive to me. Personally, I think both princesses are great for different reasons. I just think that with the criticisms I often read about Disney princesses in general, thinking Cinderella is more of a strong female character than Snow White, by modern standards, is still surprising to me. I think that they're both strong women. I just also think that on a purely surface level, Snow White seems like the stronger character to me. And speaking of strong women, let's talk for a minute about the concept of girl bosses in general, because I think the term is offensive and degrading to women. If the point of feminism is to lift all women up, it's not, and it doesn't. But if it was, this doesn't help. First of all, do you see men out there calling themselves boy bosses and boss babes? No, because that would be pathetic and embarrassing. The term girl boss inherently promotes certain lifestyles, jobs, and choices over others. So you're already holding certain women above others, specifically ones who chose not to have families. You can be a CEO if you want, and if you're good at it, but just do your job and stop calling so much attention to it. Gosh. There's sexist people out there, yes, very annoying, but you have the luxury of just ignoring them. The only people actually holding women back from achieving what they want are the feminists, because they're telling women that they'll never be happy unless they have a career, but if they do, they'll never be paid as much as a man or won't be hired because they're a woman. That's, first of all, not true, but it's also illegal to discriminate like that. So you're holding women back by lying to them like this, and also only by focusing on high-profile jobs. That's stupid. Not everyone wants that, and not everyone would be good at that. And the qualities we point to and characters we hold up as examples, it's not good. People don't dislike Captain Marvel because she's a woman. They dislike her because she's obnoxious and rude, and just really boring. What this tells me is that a successful girl boss is rude, selfish, brash, can't take criticism, well, because she's perfect and would never even need criticism anyway. Do you see why this might be a problem? To uphold this as something young girls should aspire to be? That is not how you get good, and in this case, specifically, female leaders. Something my pastor said to me many years ago, and I've never forgotten, is that faithfulness is success. His point was to bring glory to God and be thankful wherever He has you in life. And I think that applies here too. No matter what job you have, no matter where you are in life, no matter your situation, have a good attitude, work hard, and pursue your dreams. Make sure they're good dreams, of course. And I think that's the true message of Cinderella and why everyone, Men, women, and children, even 75 whole years later, almost, can still look up to Cinderella and be inspired by her. Well, that's it. Get off my ship now.
Yes, get off. This is my ship. And whatever you do, do not subscribe. Do not comment, do not like this video, but most of all, don't subscribe. This is your final warning.
Sounds pretty serious. I'd listen to her if I were you.
More than anything, I'm thankful that this script's done more than anything. Don't subscribe.
I declare
Woman!
I just wanted you to know that you can't just say the word and expect anything to happen.
I didn't say it, I declared it.
Still, it's not anything.
Your intolerance infuriates me. You're just a mass of prejudices, aren't you?